But we're in the studio with Dan Perry, International Affairs Analyst. And Dan, thanks for joining us. As always, enjoy having you with us. I mean, to start off with the Saudis here a bit here. Yes, this has been seen as a nice, warm, friendly stop in Israel. We're not sure exactly, I think, what tone will come around the Palestinian stop on his visit. But the main event is in Saudi Arabia right now for the U.S. president.
I think it is. You know, it's been said that Israel has no foreign policy, only domestic. I think the state of affairs in the United States is such that the same can be said of the world's indispensable superpower. So Biden has midterms coming up. He's been given a big assist, the Democrats have, by the Supreme Court ruling on abortion. That sort of enraged so many people that the Democrats have a shot. But right now, the news in the U.S. is 9.1% inflation annually. That came out yesterday.
Yeah.
And Biden, I think, has to do something that makes it look to American voters as if he knows, he cares, and he's on the case. And what that means in a visit to Saudi Arabia is, you know, even if Saudi Arabia cannot produce enough oil to really make a difference, they have to at least appear to be trying.
Okay.
He has to appear to be able to to appear to be able to exercise some suasion over the Saudis, and that's the price the Saudis may have to pay in real oil production, in alignment with U.S. policy over Russia, Ukraine, and in general in making the right noises in order to get what they want, which is legitimization of Mohammed bin Salman.
The Palestinians hated President Trump. He, you know, was no relations essentially between them and the Republican administration under Trump. They seem to be waiting for the Democrats to come back into power, and I'll put this pointedly, now they seem to be shunning or unhappy with the Democratic president as well. I mean, who are they waiting for? Where's their backing likely to come from in the United States at this point, or anywhere for that matter?
I mean, the Palestinians are perennially unhappy, and I must say they generally have a good reason. Under Trump, they had the excellent reason. With Biden, I think it's a bit of, you know, posturing and diplomacy. They understand very well that the current Israeli government can't give them very much. And they understand very well that Biden's not going to press Lapid. He wants to help Lapid, not make trouble for him. So I think they're focused on concrete things. They're happy to have the aid back that Biden restored. They'd like to see some of the PLO's, the terror organization declarations be removed. They'd like to.
Biden's not moving in that direction.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And also, I really don't think they're really going to reestablish a consulate in East Jerusalem, at least not before the election, because that would embarrass Lapid and Bennett. So there's not that much you can give them except a bit of love when it comes to declarations about how the two-state solution is still the thing that they're going for.
Just not in the near term.
Well, I mean, this is. I think we're looking at something very interesting and strategic in the broader sense of the Middle East. It used to be that the Arab world wanted a two-state solution because they thought that was good for the Palestinians. And it was a price Israel would have to pay, giving up territory. Okay. I think there's been some revisionist thinking here. A two-state solution, in fact, saves Israel demographically. And if you don't have a two-state solution, you could have a one-state outcome that is an Arab state, a half Arab state, or a mostly Arab state. I think the world has taken a step back and said it could be ugly in the run-up to that future, but if this is really what Israel wants, then okay. And they're going to proceed and let the two sides hammer it out among themselves. It no longer is so clear who benefits most from a two-state solution. And by the way, many people in Palestine understand this enough that it's causing them to be very maximalist in their demands whenever actual diplomatic processes happen. We saw they had two offers for a two-state solution in 2001 and 2008-9. Both were offers I would have accepted. Offer me 95% of what I'm asking for, I'm generally going to go for it. But they played a hardball. They ended up with nothing. But the thinking is they might end up with everything because of Israel's own strategic blindness in where it's headed with the West Bank.
So what does this visit mean for Yair Lapid?
I think this visit is very critical for Lapid's ability to project what I think he has actually earned in a decade of rather successful politics in Israel, that he's a genuine leader on the world stage who is no less potentially a figure on that global stage than Netanyahu. Of course, Biden has to hedge his bets to a degree. Netanyahu could be back in power in a matter of months. So he's been rather strikingly respectful towards a person who ultimately is a political enemy of the U.S. Democratic Party. We saw him shake Netanyahu's hand yesterday, and a lot of people sort of raised their eyebrows about that. He seemed rather warm, given what we know is the reality. But I mean, it's a chance for Lapid to really lay a marker down with his own abilities as a diplomat. You know, there is a sense in Israel after 12 years of Netanyahu, what I believe a rather infantile sense, that Bibi has some amazing magical power on the world stage, largely driven by his incredible eloquence with American accented English. And Lapid is I think, a person who can challenge Bibi's stature in that regard. And this is his big chance, clearly.
For fostering and enduring bonds and continuing them that link the people of Israel and the United States. That's what this visit is about. Affirming those ties that stretch back to just 11 minutes after Israel declared statehood, when the United States became the first country in the world to recognize Israel.
So all in all, I think there's no big differences, and the mutual reassurance about how to go ahead vis-a-vis Iran and the Gulf was there, and all eyes are turning towards Saudi Arabia now.
Dan.
It was obviously a mutual reaffirmation of a very strong relationship, as mentioned on the technological side, support by America for Israel's development of technology, and in general, very, very strong political statements. However, I would note that whereas Biden emphasized diplomacy vis-a-vis Iran, Lapid made very clear that that force might be needed. When Lapid was asked, is there daylight, he said there's no daylight on the goal. And I do think it's significant that Lapid gave Biden a clear statement that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unjustified, and also, in the end, in the question and answer session, was dragged into stating what I believe is Lapid's actual view, that the two-state solution is necessary for Israel's own demographic salvation. That whether he's able to do anything about this in the near future is an open question.
But have this commonality of Iran being the enemy. What do you make of that?
Well, the enemy of your enemy is your friends, and everybody here sees Iran as an enemy, so it's a galvanizer of all the various Arab countries, Israel, and the United States. But I think while Israel would like to share its technologies with Saudi Arabia in trying to limit Iran, there's only so much they'll share right now, because after all, this is still a new relationship, and there's a lot of years of enmity been there, and not a lot of issues have been resolved. But clearly there'll be an effort to lure the Saudis into the fold of making relations with Israel by offering all sorts of technological possibilities from Israel.
It almost seems like lovers of peace worldwide should hope the Islamic Republic stays in power. Lest the new alliance between Israel and the moderate Arab world should fall apart.
And Biden will be talking to all the Gulf leaders, it seems, so he wants that message to come into the Abraham Accords.
I think the interesting case is Iraq, that was specifically mentioned, and you know, there's no necessary enmity between the Israeli people and the Iraqi people. They don't share a border, and a third of Iraq is Kurds, who are friendly towards the Jews and Israel anyway. We'll see if that goes anywhere beyond a declarative. But you know, an interesting thing that struck me is that Lapid, in his comments, he was very values-based, even more than politics-based, and he spoke of two values: one, peace/moderation, and the other, freedom and you know, democracy. And there is some awkwardness, somewhat, in the Abraham Accords, because whereas, of course, from the narrative of the Abraham Accords, all the countries in question share the values of peace and moderation, only Israel shares the value of democracy. And even in Israel's case, that value is very badly undermined by the occupation of the West Bank.
That is correct. Well, before the press conference, we were talking about Joe Biden's views on Saudi Arabia, his views on Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and his stance on human rights. And he was saying that anyone who knows him knows his stance on human rights and how he feels about the murder of that journalist. But we were just talking about how he had brushed those feelings really to the side, had silenced them, because now he needs the Saudis.
Joe Biden has discovered on the cusp of 80 that diplomacy is the art of the possible. He needs Saudi Arabia. We'll see if he gives Mohammed bin Salman the kind of handshake that he gave Netanyahu despite COVID. I think that's one thing he can give.
We'll see if it's a fist bump, too.
Yes.